rough example on how things can look. These are now just a couple of text examples that are coming from a research setting. It's not a full article. It's a couple of paragraphs, and I just want to walk you through how things can look at the first draft level, at a AI-supported draft level, and at a human editor drafted level. So here we have a short excerpt. This is a first draft from a researcher. So it's very simply written. I'll let you show it. I don't want to read it to you, and I'll just give you some time to quickly scroll through. So especially if you read the first paragraph, think of the sentence structure, think of the level of detail that you get, and try to get a feel for that. So I think you can see that this is something that a lot of us may have written in that style. There's relatively short sentences. The language is not complicated. Has a lot of the factors in. So what you typically see in such a first draft is correct ideas. This is the big thing. You want to get it onto paper, but it might be a bit too generic because you didn't have time to hone it yet, to really narrow down, to chisel away the things that you truly need to bring out. So the specificity might be limited, and also on the stylistic side, you can see a bit of weak transitions between sentences, which is typically normal. So it's really a big mental load to put something on paper, and you want to focus on the content pieces first before you work on the style things. Overall, this is also the research gap. So the idea where the research needs to go into is mentioned, but it's not emphasized. It's not brought out clearly. And that's typically what you see. You have an author, as an author, you know your field. You know why you did a certain investigation, a certain study. So you mention it, you bring it out, but not in a way that somebody who has nothing to do with your specific gap would directly see as a gap. So this change of perspective often doesn't happen on an author in the first drafts. So it's scientifically correct, it's acceptable, it's not publication ready. And now you can see an example for an AI-assisted draft, and I'll also quickly be quiet to let you read that. So what you can see here, especially the second point on the limitations that are visible here, is there's very weak claims, they're vague, and they're not very specific. So this is actually worse than in the first draft that a human did. There's also not a really strong articulation of the research gap. Again, here, this is something where you need to really chisel away to bring it out. It does have a little bit of repetitive phrasing, a little bit similar sentence structure here. And again, here, the generic study aim also mentions the last sentence. You can really see it tried to simplify, tried to summarize, but in a way that's generic, and that's not what it actually helps you, and it actually didn't make it better. It just made it easier for you to write that. And now let's look at what this could look like after human editing by a professional academic editor. You can see when you read that, for me, that feels much better. So it's very clear. It uses very precise concepts, very precise definitions of, for example, disease, of the toxic air pollution, and so on. And the research gap has been brought out explicitly. The sentence structure is less repetitive, and it gets into a nice flow, and it feels like an academic paper in this sense. So this combination of a first draft, AI improvements, and human editing could work quite well. So what I liked about this part as well is the editor added beyond the AI draft a very clear logical progression from the background to the gap to the aim. What I mentioned with the academic tone, the academic precision is much, much better compared to a more generalistic LLM. the novelty and the why this research is so important is much better articulated, and it aligns better with the journal expectations on what you would want to see. To make this explicit, you can also go back and have a look at that again later on. The opening sentence was altered to immediately establish the importance and the relevance of the topic. The research gap was much more clarified, was adding more clarification on what is missing in the existing studies that are out there already. For example, long-term exposure, multiple pollutants, and so on. A couple of words have been added to really make this more specific, more precise, and added what the contribution is of the new study, what this will bring to the field, and what additional insights can be drawn from that. And aligned the language with the journal tone, with the expectation of how a language should feel like, what it should sound like, what it should look like, especially for the high impact journals. So that's a couple of things that can happen in the drafting process, especially when you get support. I'll have another example to show here now as well. So maybe you can now follow on as well and keep these critical points in mind. So is it specific enough? What is the tone? How are the sentences linked? How does it feel? And is that good enough for academic writing? So I'll show you another example, and I'd let you also get your form your own opinion a bit better based on the things that I've just now pointed out. So again, here you'll probably notice a couple of things. The author here was using very short, very safe sentences. There's a limited interpretation of the results from the study going on. It's really just we did something and results were good. There is very limited engagement with the literature. What else is out there in the field? Why was this done? And it's sounding very cautious in some places, a bit repetitive because of the very similar sentence structure that was used. Again, here, AI generated draft of that. And let's see what you think about that. You can also see here again, it's very generic, even more than before. Very, very short. There's really nothing you can say from that draft that is really helpful compared to the first one. There's still no comparison with existing literature. There's only superficial discussion of limitations and no implications that draw from that. So again, a professional editor refined that again as well. And so with this, I think we can all agree that there's quite some improvements. So the interpretation is now much more grounded in the existing literature. There's balanced and credible discussion of the limitations of the study as well. There's a look to the future. What are future research directions after this? And again, the tone and the voice is very different. It's really this academic, scholarly tone that is common in academic writing. Again here, what changed in the human edited version, the research gap was much more explicitly articulated. The logical flow is much better. It's a very clear structure, typical in academic writing: context, problem, objective, contribution. The depth of interpretation, of course, much higher, shifted from describing results to explaining why these are actually relevant and important. And again, precision and clarity, this is super important. Replace the vague terms that get even more vague with AI tools, the discipline-specific, very precise language. This is really important also for journals, because they wouldn't accept one of these first topics because you really can't draw much information from that if you're coming from an academic background. Also, tone and academic voice, there's a balance between confidence and caution. It removed overgeneralizations that are often going into the too cautious side. adjusted the phrasing to match conventions of the high impact journals, and also touched the topic of ethical AI use, because the content accuracy was verified and ensured, because in the end the author is accountable. Anything that's the AI generated is still the responsibility of the author, and everything basically should be checked and verified. So when we compare AI tools versus human editors, on a couple of things, they are both very strong. First one that comes to mind really is grammar. And why is that? Grammar follows very fixed rules. And AI, other machine learning tools, are very good at following rules. The improvement on logic and flow can sometimes be done by AI tools, especially modern generations are getting better and better at this. However, human editors can still beat them in this game. And what is currently mostly a bit missing for many AI tools that can be improved for such drafts is looking at journal fit, looking at the ethical oversight, and looking at the reviewer perspective. And that is where human editors, human professional editors really shine, because they have the experience, they've been through that many, many times, and they can add that little bit different perspective, different viewpoint, where they are more flexible in providing that.